Hey folks, how you doing? Welcome to the second session in Bring Your Own Bold, our virtual summit from the creative agency Shaped By. I'm Dave Corlett, the business director of the agency, and really great to have you with us. We've just had a fantastic panel debate all about standing up by finding your bold. If you joined that, thank you so much. Really hope you enjoyed it. As far as this session is concerned, so I want to start with a bit of a question for you guys. What's the difference between like a no-name pair of sneakers and the latest Air Jordans? Because it's not the material, it's not the quality, it's the brand. Brand is the only thing that creates irrational value, something that makes a company more valuable than the sum of its parts. And why is that? Because really, when it comes down to it, people don't buy based on logic. They buy based on emotion, and an effective brand taps into that emotion. Now, doing just that has helped Axonius grow from a no-name cybersecurity company, effectively, into a $2.6 billion brand in just 5 years. And I'm so delighted to be joined by Kaite Rosa, the company's Senior Director of Brand, to give you guys an inside look into how she and her team did it. So, hey, Kaite, how you doing?
Hi, Dave. Great. Thank you for having me.
You're in New York, right, for Ad Week?
I am. I'm currently in a hotel room holed up here for this session in the midst of Ad Week 2023.
Nice. Well, I hope you're enjoying it. But listen, before we dive into that story, and it is an incredible story, could you just tell us, for those who don't know, just a bit of context, can you just tell us a little bit about Axonius exactly and what the business does?
Yeah, absolutely. So Axonius, we're a cybersecurity company. We serve IT and security professionals. And basically what our platform does is we give IT and security teams a comprehensive inventory of all of the assets in their environment. We uncover their security gaps, and then we trigger automate response actions whenever those devices, cloud instances, SaaS apps, whenever they deviate from basically expectations, so policies, controls, things like that.
Nice. And I know from experience, I know from following you guys, it's a business that's grown and exploded at a rate of knots. But when you joined Axonius, and when was that, by the way? When did you join Axonius?
Yeah, I joined April 2020.
2020. And when you joined, I know we've spoken about this before, there was kind of, little, if any, real cohesion around your kind of brand narrative, your brand messaging. And when you stepped into that role, how did you go about changing that?
Yeah, the great question. So, there was little cohesion, and there really wasn't a strong brand message. So we had good product messaging about what we did, but we weren't really able to tie that to a higher narrative or a broader picture, which made a lot of what I was trying to do really difficult. So I prefer to approach messaging with a partner, usually an external partner, someone who can have that unbiased look at what you're doing and what's resonating. So we partnered with an agency, and we completed dozens of interviews with industry folks, analysts, experts, internal folks, our own security team, just about like their perceptions and experiences with Axonius. And the message that we heard over and over again was that cybersecurity is incredibly complex, right? It's always changing. It's always evolving. What you did, never mind 2 years ago, what you did yesterday often isn't relevant today. So what we do is we give people a foundational knowledge of what they have so that they can protect it. And kind of the work that we did coming out of that was around this message of controlling complexity. So that was all in very early 2021 is when we started to explore that and really started to explore this theme of controlling complexity and bringing it to life, not just on our website and in our copy, but within our campaigns and our branding.
Yeah, and again, from speaking to you previously and from understanding a bit more about Axonius, it really seems like that was a kind of quite a pivotal moment in the brands or in the brand story, so to speak. So, you've landed on controlling complexity as a brand message, but then I suppose it's one thing working with an agency and great working with an agency, always the right thing to do in my Bible. But so you've landed on controlling complexity as your brand message, but that's only the start of it, isn't it? You know, how exactly did you go about bringing that to life, and just how transformative was that for the business as a result? What were those successful outcomes?
Yeah, so that all happened, and essentially we kind of had this overarching pillar message that we got from the agency, and then I took that and worked that into like, what are some tangible ways that we can talk about this in terms of the product, in terms of our brand. So like I said, I think it's really helpful to have a third party come in and help you do that work and get that kind of bird's eye view that when you're immersed in it every day, you just can't have. But then I think it's up to the kind of boots on the ground to really massage that, work it into a way that works with your overall company, what your values, your culture, all of that. And so when we had that messaging and we wanted to bring it to life, we kind of, our whole approach to marketing at Axonius, well, branding, I should say, at Axonius, is we look at what our competitors are doing and we do the opposite. We don't want to be like our competitors. And our competitors are, it's cybersecurity. So there's a lot of FUD out there. There's like mechanical birds and matrix numbers falling from the background and hackers in a hoodie. And it's a lot of like fear-based imagery, and rarely are humans involved. And so we said, this is incredibly human. No matter who you are, where you're from, what industry you're in, we all face complexity in life. We all have challenges that we're overcoming. Let's humanize this message. Let's do something different from the competition and from the industry as a whole, and let's humanize it. And it just so happened to be the same time that Simone Biles was in the Tokyo Olympics. And we were saying, who is somebody, like, let's go big with this, like go big or go home. Let's take a big risk. And who's somebody, when you think of someone who is really great at controlling complexity in their own lives, who do you think of? And, we had a bunch of conversations, and ultimately we were like, Simone Biles, not only did she just very publicly on a massive global stage control complexity, but I think less people know about some of the other struggles she's gone through. She was a foster child and was adopted, for example. So we really started to explore that, and we were like, yeah, right, like, no one's ever heard of us. We're this small little brand. Like, there's no way that Simone Biles is going to work with Axonius. And lo and behold, she did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really incredible story. I mean, first of all, how did you land Simone Biles for this? How exactly did that process work?
Yeah, great question. We landed Simone Biles by being human. So we initially reached out to, her agency just to confirm, is she even accepting new, partners? Yes, she is, but she does not partner with brands for like one-off instances. It has to be something that she's very bought into. And not only does she need to be bought into it, but she works very, very closely with her family. And you basically have to sell Simone and sell her whole family, her mom, her dad, her brother, like everybody, her agent, who for all intents and purposes might as well be a member of the family. She's super close with her as well. We said, okay, great. How are we going to do this? We had, I think, maybe a day to get something in before she was like, I don't know, back on the road or something. We had a very specific time constraint, and we filmed what we internally call the Hey Simone video. And this is, mind you, still like Omicron was coming back. It was still very much like pandemic times. We're not getting together in person. We all wrote a script. A handful of us wrote a script, and basically said, like, you're probably like, let's address the elephant in the room. What does cybersecurity have to do with Simone Biles? Here's how we think this ties together. You're facing all this complexity. That's what our brand is about. This is the message we want to say. Oh, by the way, we also understand some of the very real complexities you faced in your own life. We have someone on our team who actually we featured in the final iteration of our campaign with Simone, the growth video that came out in July, who is a foster parent and happens to live in Texas, where Simone is from. He's fostered 12 children, adopted, I believe, 3 or 4. So we brought him into it too. And we were like, meet John. We understand the ethos of a lot of the things that matter to you. And that worked. It was, I think every step of the way, we've really just like been ourselves. And not only did it get her kind of in the door with us, but her team and she herself made it clear that they very much valued the partnership, and that our approach of just being human beings and being people was very different from what they're used to working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in a way, more importantly, so obviously Simone and the other athletes that you've worked with and the other partners that you've worked with buy into the connection between cybersecurity, Axonius, controlling complexity, and what they do. But obviously, it's been massively pivotal to your success as a brand over the past few years. What were the messages back from customers? How did they buy into it, and why did it resonate so much with them?
Great question. And that was like, this was risky for us. We went from having zero brand plays at all. Like, I think we maybe sponsored an ad on a couple of podcasts, and that was it. And we went from like these like and they were like homemade, like, in my basement, I'm recording the VO for things, like nothing fancy, laughable, embarrassing, terrible stuff, to working with Simone Biles. So it was a risk, and it was that we were constantly answering this question of, what does Simone Biles have to do with cybersecurity? Why are we partnering with only athletes? What would that have to do with anything? And by the way, just kind of happened to work out that way. It wasn't necessarily intentional. So there was this fear of like, shoot, like we're putting all of our eggs in this one basket. If customers don't receive this well, like, we are screwed. This will be our jobs. And especially because there wasn't that necessarily like, we're talking about the product where, it wasn't super direct. It was very like high level, kind of touchy feely concepts, and customers loved it. I mean, customers, we got tons of emails of just like, my kid is in gymnastics and we look up to Simone so much and she's such a great role model, and like, that's what made me think of you. Or employees, candidates coming to us like, you're featuring a Black woman in sport. I'm interested in working with you guys. I'm interested in working at Axonius. Or just the overall question of like, what does Simone have to do with cybersecurity? So I'm going to click on your ad and I'm going to interact with it and I'm going to learn more. So for us, it was wildly successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose we just had this chat on the previous panel discussion, actually. That unexpectedness, I suppose, of these two things coming together, which is at the heart of creativity as a whole, I suppose. These two things that you wouldn't necessarily put together, but they just work, breeds that curiosity, and obviously then invites people to understand more. I suppose that's kind of the external part, but within your organization, when this was pitched internally, how did you kind of bring colleagues and partners and people within the business along on that journey with you to try and help them understand? And I suppose, again, this is another conversation we just had, but from a brand point of view, everybody has to buy into it within an organization. What was the kind of internal communication like to make sure that people understood exactly what you're doing and why you were doing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel really privileged and lucky to say that, like, did we have to really work hard to convince folks internally that this was a leap we should take? And the answer is really no, we didn't. And the reason why is because we are in an industry that's chock full of this kind of like copy and paste marketing, where everything looks the same, everything sounds the same. And so by following, if we were to follow everyone else's playbook, then the ceiling of success is simply the people who came before us, right? But the real risk was playing it safe. So yes, we are definitely in a fortunate position where we didn't have to convince anybody to go with this. We had a lot of creative freedom and liberty at the C-level and across the company. And really the bigger challenge was, how are we going to use this to really stand out? And how are we? The bigger fear early on was, is our audience going to get it? And that definitely, like I said, was really scary. And we had to hope that people were interested enough and that we did the creative well enough that people wanted to find out the answer of what does Simone Biles have to do with cybersecurity. And I mean, it worked out. The numbers don't lie. We had in 2020, our brand recognition was 9%, and we're now at 27%. So it did work out. But like I said, we're super fortunate that we didn't have to convince anyone for this campaign specifically. And I don't take that for granted. I have worked at companies where far less risky brand plays have been heavily questioned by executives. I worked at an organization where we simply were doing a podcast that was for a very niche audience that was barely marketed to at all, which allowed us to use easy to kind of stand out. And this podcast that we were doing at this organization was wildly successful in terms of our audience, and still got the question constantly and the skepticism from executives of, well, what's the ROI on the podcast? And it's like, well, it doesn't really work that way. So I think, for people out there who aren't in this position and don't have the kind of privilege that my team has. Am I freezing on your end for you?
No, I think you're good. Yeah.
Okay.
It jumped for a second, but we're good.
Okay. Sorry. Apologies for that. So yeah, my answer for people who aren't in the position that I am in is, I think you've got to get really good at storytelling your story, right? Like your whole campaign is going to be a story, but you need to storytell the power of storytelling and how that impacts brand and why that's important. And kind of like the statement that you said at the beginning of the session, Dave, people they don't buy based on logic, they buy based on emotion. So how are we going to tap that, and how are we going to use that to help stand out? And you can whether you like case study other organizations that have done similar things, or whether you pull your own metrics. I think you can use paired data and paired storytelling to tell the impact of your plan.
100%, yeah, and 9% to 27% is amazing, especially within cybersecurity, which is so crowded, such a crowded space. So massive hats off to you for that. Obviously, that's a success story, but was there anything on that whole journey, or on this journey, because I know it's still ongoing, that maybe hasn't worked so well, and kind of what were the lessons that you learned along the way there?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, again, I recognize that I am like speaking from this kind of crazy place of privilege within marketing, and we've had the budget. Didn't have to convince people. Like, a lot of those barriers that are usually there were eliminated for us, and I certainly understand that struggle. My previous role was a bootstrapped company, and I had like pennies on the dollar to work with, and had to, and was the challenger brand, and had to really shake things up. So I fully understand the struggle. But what I'll say, our biggest challenge throughout this has not been like, oh, we tried something and it fell flat on its face and it was terrible. Our biggest challenge is we did not know what the hell we were doing. Nobody on my team had like this kind of high level advertising background. And that's really, what we're doing. We had never done a lot of like the paid media strategies that we were doing, never mind working with essentially a celebrity, doing a massive production. I think the biggest production I had ever done was like, the case study videos and that type of stuff. So I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And none of us did, my CMO included. And it's funny, we were actually interviewing for an entirely separate role, and ended up speaking to one woman who came from advertising, had worked on the agency side with like major brands, L'Oreal, Amex, like celebrities, all of these kind of like name drop worthy organizations. And she knew everything about what we were doing and how to get it done. And we just said, we have to have you, and hired her. And I constantly say, her name is Karen, and I always say there's no way this campaign would have happened if Karen weren't here, because there were so many in the weeds details that I didn't know about, and that we all didn't know about and know how to approach. So long story short, all of that to say, I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced is simply needing to be humble enough to, and check your ego enough to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I think we can do it really well, but I don't know exactly how to get there. Be comfortable admitting that you don't know what you don't know, working with people who know how to do it, and then just like getting really comfortable in the uncomfortable. And that's kind of like a key to, I think, working at Axonius in general. We've seen such explosive growth in terms of not just like, bottom line and customers, but employees too. And things have changed so rapidly that like you're often just building the plane in the air and trying to look out for the icebergs ahead. And half the time you don't even know that you've like hit one until the ship is going down and you're like, oh shoot, we should have done something about that. So just kind of being real comfortable in being uncomfortable and being really comfortable in taking risks and knowing that they might pay off. If they don't pay off, like you got to pivot real quick.
Yeah. And just a point on that. So I don't know how much you can speak to this from experience. I'm sure you can, but is there something to be said for the appetite for maybe taking some of those risks at a company that is kind of as fast growing and as ever changing as Axonius? So your brand team, for instance, and your kind of collaborators in marketing and across the marketing side of the business, you're not the only ones kind of experiencing quite volatile sort of change on a daily basis. The whole business is kind of, operating in quite a seismic market and conditions that maybe force that attitude of constant, not necessarily just risk taking all the time, but thinking on your feet and having to kind of adapt to certain situations. Does that help working in a business where that is kind of the attitude right across the organization?
Oh, absolutely. I think I don't know, I always kind of, maybe this isn't the right frame of mind to think of it as, but as like we all kind of operate with this startup mentality. And even if you're beyond when we're beyond the startup phase at this point, right? But I think you still have to have that that appetite for risk and that comfort in taking risky decisions in order to do well. And it's funny, as I said earlier, I'm here at Adweek, and one of the underlying themes throughout so many of these sessions ties back to the theme of what you're doing today. And it's all about bravery. And one of the sessions I was at, and the one kind of quotable moment that really resonated with me was a gentleman said, it's not about what's the risk if this goes wrong. It's what if it goes right? Like, what are we going to get if it goes right? And I'm probably butchering exactly how he said that. I have it written down somewhere, but I'm thinking of it in those terms now. What's the good that could come from this? Not what's the negative, because the negative can almost always outweigh the positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, we talk about it a lot internally, and with clients as well. There's a bigger risk of not doing it than there is of doing it, essentially.
Yes, so exactly.
I love the brand placement there, by the way. Nice Axonius bottle. Good to get that in. We've just got a few more minutes before we can take some questions, and it might only just be one question, to be honest, because time is of the essence. I just wanted to touch really quickly, if you can, on collaboration. So I know that there's a lot of stakeholders involved in what you guys do. Your CMO, Nate, is a wonderful man. Your agency partners, the rest of your internal team, obviously your brand partners, Simone Biles and the like as well. Is there a particular secret to your success as a kind of collaborative group?
I'm going to say it again. I think that my team, I'm really, really lucky. And a lot of this, actually, what I'm about to say comes directly from Nate and in the way that he leads. We operate in a very human-centric way. And I think that allows you to feel comfortable being vulnerable. And creative ideas they're like born out of vulnerability. You're not going to have great, like risky, bold ideas if you play it safe. But in order to feel comfortable playing it safe, you need this environment of it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to put out your wild, crazy moonshot ideas. And I think that we kind of bring that human-centric approach to our partnerships and to our like even internal partnerships as well, that we're all in this together. I'm not looking at my agency. I'm truly looking at my agency partners as an extension of my team, and to like operate on the things that we certainly do not know at all. And we're hiring you for a reason, like, let's let you do your job so I can do my job. And just really, there's just a lot of respect, I think, across the board. And we really value the people that we're working with and the expertise that they bring to the table, whether that's the internal folks or the external folks. So I think just like, let other people do their jobs and like get out of the way and let them do what they're good at. And that doesn't mean that you can't have like, hard conversations sometime and you can't disagree, but just this element, I think, of respect allows us to collaborate really well and allows us to encourage new ideas to be born. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great advice for anyone out there. We've got just over 4 minutes for it might only be one question, to be honest. We'll see how we get on, but I've got some audience questions here. What were the main success metrics you were looking at for the Controlling Complexity campaign? Or it says the Simone campaign, but I suppose that's the Controlling Complexity campaign as a whole.
Controlling Complexity, yeah. So the biggest success metric that we went into this with was brand recall, so both aided and unaided. And the aided recall rate that I mentioned earlier, which is the 27%, was really the important one. Unaided, we were like, there's like no chance in hell that we're going to really, rank on that. And actually we have. I mean, a very minimal amount. We went from 0 to 4%, but that was like a celebratory win for us. But initially those were the biggest metrics, right? We knew that we weren't going to get into the weeds. We weren't looking at like, okay, how has this campaign like impacted the bottom of the funnel? How has this campaign like helped us close deals? Like, we're not looking at any of that. If I can attribute a direct line to revenue, you have to be super good with your data and super close to your marketing ops team. And B, like, that's more of a nice to have for us. So like, for example, the landing page to access the videos that we've created, they all have a form, but I've made it very clear to everybody, like, this, if someone fills out the form to get a demo, sweet, amazing. That is not my expectation though. So we're looking at brand awareness, both aided and unaided. I'm also starting to look at the EVM, earned media value for this. So I'm working with our internal PR team to develop that, because we have had some high level media placements. Inbound leads over time, right? The theory is that the more we invest in brand, then we should have, the request for inbound, should increase over time. So those are some of the big metrics that I'm looking at. I'm also, looking at branded search traffic. That's important. And I'm totally blanking on some of the other ones here, but hopefully you get the general idea.
I get the general idea, yeah. And I think actually, again, this comes back to that point of bravery and confidence as well, because, a lot of organizations would be kind of grilling you on, well, what's your impact on pipeline? What's the impact on revenue? How are we tying this back to ROI? And what you're saying, and I think correctly so, is that if you have brand awareness that shifts from 9% to 27%, there will be an impact on that. But like you said, you have to get incredibly granular and quite frankly, this might be beyond a lot of people for good reason, is that, to measure those things accurately, there are so many other factors that come into that, quite frankly. But, you do that work, you make those investments, and it is an investment. And you guys have seen through your business growth that it's been a massive driver of that. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's quite a brave business move, if I can say that.
I will say it is probably the one that keeps me up at night the most. I constantly have this like fear in the back of my head that like at some point someone's going to be like, well, wait a minute, like that, like what, like how much have we influenced? And that, so I'm constantly, I'm partnering. Like, I think key to success on a campaign like this, or any campaign, is really having a tight relationship with whoever owns your data on your team. For us, that's our marketing ops team and analytics, and really saying like, this is your area of expertise. Like, here's some things I think we should be looking at, but what else can I be looking at? How can you help me tell my story of the success of this campaign? So, as I mentioned, a lot of this has been net new for me. So I've relied on the intelligence of other folks in the organization. I have Axonius has me set up with a brand mentor. I've asked her what else I should be looking at. So there's a lot that you could look at, and just because you don't want to boil the ocean. So I think really being smart about the data points that you're looking at, and you want to tie them back to the business value. But I think you also, in many cases, need to educate leaders that this is not something that is a direct line to revenue 9 times out of 10. That it's a long game.
100%. And what a great point to end on. Thank you so much, Katie. Really, really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your ad week. I'm sure you will. For everyone out there, go check out Axonius, go check out the Controlling Complexity campaign, because it is really, really, it's just a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece both in building brand, and it's a masterpiece in the campaign itself. So hats off to you guys for that. And thank you so much for joining me at BYOB.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody on the line listening. I really appreciate it. And if you want to check out the campaign, our latest iteration is at axonius.com/growth.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.